Welcome to the WWE Podcast, the most passionate and authentic wrestling analysis on the web. We've got you covered with every Raw, SmackDown, and NXT show, giving you a no bullshit opinion. We know you love wrestling. We do too. So let's get this show underway.
And that's the bottom line. What? 'Cause Stone Cold said so.
Alright everybody, welcome back to another edition of the SmackDown review here on the WWE Podcast. As always, I'm your host Michael Ritter, and today we're going to be talking about the SmackDown that aired on January 8th, 2021, as well as at the very end of the episode, I will be giving my top 5 general managers of all time. So if you are interested in that, you can stick around and we will get you that towards the end of the show. But, of course, per usual, we will cover SmackDown in its entirety before we get there. And I feel like there was a lot of good to take out of this episode of SmackDown, especially the in-ring work. If you're a fan of just simply watching good wrestling, then I feel like tonight was probably a pretty good show in your opinion. The tag team match with the Street Profits and Dolph Ziggler, I thought that was a good one. The Intercontinental Championship match with Big E and Apollo Crews. And there were several spots in the gauntlet match that definitely caught your attention and maybe took you out of the moment and just got you distracted in watching wrestling, which is supposed to be why we all watch wrestling in the first place. But once again, guys, welcome to the SmackDown review. I hope all is well wherever you are. I do appreciate you guys for tuning in. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. If you're a regular listener, I appreciate you coming back. It definitely means the world to me. But we will continue on here, and we will get into this SmackDown review, which started off with Roman Reigns, Jey Uso, and Paul Heyman coming out to the ring. And Roman Reigns actually begins his promo by saying that he likes Kevin Owens. And then he kind of gives him somewhat of a backhanded compliment by comparing him to a cockroach by the way he keeps getting up. And he says that as the leader of SmackDown, it's his job to care about everybody on the roster and that he cares about their well-being. He claims to put food on everybody's table around here, and then he cuts to the chase and says that all of the blame being put on him for what happened to Kevin Owens last week should really be put on Adam Pearce. And then he and Paul Heyman demand that Pearce comes out to the ring. They show up, and the production crew plays the recap from last week, basically just when Adam Pearce greenlit the match between Kevin Owens and Jey Uso. And then Roman Reigns just asks Adam Pearce what he has to say for himself. And Adam tries to answer, but Roman just won't let him. He just won't let him get a word in because every time Adam Pearce opens his mouth, Roman Reigns interrupts him. And this is all part of a pretty amazing promo that Roman Reigns cut. He doesn't really stumble over his words at all. He just keeps on delivering here. And I can't really tell. I actually wish that somebody would put together like a YouTube video just showing every single time that Adam Pearce has been interrupted over the past few weeks, because it just seems like 10 to 15 times a night he's trying to get a word in and somebody is just interrupting him. I can't remember an authority figure getting treated like dog crap, I guess for lack of a better word, than Adam Pearce. So I guess it's appropriate that I'm doing my general manager top 5 tonight, just strictly because Adam Pearce seemed to be featured pretty heavily on this episode of SmackDown. This just had to be a pretty uncomfortable moment for Adam Pearce, just strictly because he was in the ring with Roman Reigns, surrounded by Paul Heyman and Jey Uso, and he was just being questioned for doing something that he clearly, as we saw last week, didn't want to do in the first place. So he's kind of backed into a corner, and he's having to answer for that, and he's just basically trying to stall a little bit or just not quite answer. Whenever he does try to answer, he's getting interrupted, so it doesn't really help that Roman Reigns won't let him get a word out, but eventually he does pretty much beg Paul Heyman to kind of jump in and try to calm Roman Reigns down. But before he does get to do that, Roman actually kind of cuffs up his suit, just grabs him like you've seen done hundreds of times, backs him into a corner, and then Paul Heyman gives him some quote-unquote counseling, which kind of gets Roman Reigns a step back, take a deep breath, and then he says, "My mistake," and then he assures Adam Pearce that right now he is safe, but he did put a heavy emphasis on the right now, so you definitely see a little bit more of that later on that night, but it just kind of makes me wonder if Adam Pearce is just going to be on the receiving end of multiple beatings here coming in the future, or in the near future. Sorry guys, it's late again. But just strictly because last week I mentioned during the Kevin Owens segment that they just showed the recap for in this opening segment on SmackDown, that Kevin Owens had referenced Adam Pearce having a previous in-ring career, and I thought that was weird that they mentioned that. Obviously, it was for a reason because they wanted to get it in our minds. They referenced it again tonight, and then we will get to a little bit more of that later on in the show because I don't want to spoil anything just yet. And next, we have the Intercontinental Championship match between Big E and Apollo Crews. This is actually your rare babyface versus babyface championship match, and it kind of starts by Apollo Crews coming out fast and goes for a pinfall in the opening seconds. This pretty much sets the tone for a fast-paced physical match between these two guys. And when you actually see them in the ring together, they are both pretty large individuals, so the shots that they were throwing and landing were definitely probably leaving an impact on their opponent. But Crews takes Big E to the corner and sets him up in the top turnbuckle and hits a superplex. He immediately uses his leg to hook Big E's leg to make the pinfall. However, both men's shoulders were down, so the match ended in a draw, despite Apollo Crews after the match jumping for joy, celebrating like he just won the Intercontinental Championship. But SmackDown goes to commercial break and they come back, and the referee has the belt in his hands in the ring, and he's about to make his decision, kind of like what you see in UFC whenever they're letting the judges kind of do their scorecards and the fighters are just standing there with the refs. It's kind of the setting that it was. But like I just said, the match ended up being a draw where the rulebook says that the title stays with the champion. And obviously Apollo hates that decision and begins to dispute it. Big E says that he doesn't make the rules, and he tries to shake Apollo Crews' hand. Apollo says no and smacks Big E right in the face, which obviously gets Big E to agree to give Apollo Crews the immediate rematch. And just a side note here, why do referees have to continue the 3 count if they can clearly see that both wrestlers' shoulders are down? I mean, he didn't have to go to a replay booth or anything like that to see that the shoulders were down. He clearly announced it as soon as the match was over. I mean, are they not professional referees who get paid a lot of money? I don't get why they have to continue the 3 count, but that's just a small thing that bugs me. Anyway, they do restart the match, and Big E comes out strong this time, but Apollo Crews is able to match it, and they go back and forth for about 6 more minutes before Big E hits the not-so-big ending to pick up the win and retain his Intercontinental Championship. So, this match, I mean, it was a good match. I don't want to downplay it. It didn't feel like a championship match to me at all. I mean, like I said, it was a great match in the ring, but it just felt like a regular match. I mean, these guys can both go, so I mean, I'm not necessarily surprised whenever they put on a good match. I was just expecting it to have a little bit more outside of Apollo demanding a rematch and pointing at the championship. You wouldn't have guessed that it was actually for the title. But one up, one down in terms of Big E's opponents for his singles career. I mean, unless you count Sami Zayn, then it'd be 2. But this was definitely his first Intercontinental Championship defense, and he will likely be moving on to somebody else next week. Or, I mean, who knows? Would not surprise me if Sami Zayn sneaks his face back into this Intercontinental Championship picture. But for now, we can kind of just play it by ear and see if something else pops up. But I do not see, being that, I mean, technically, I know the draw really wasn't a clean win, but technically Big E beat Apollo Crews twice in one night, so I don't see Apollo Crews being in the Intercontinental Championship picture anytime soon. So he might as well just declare himself for the Royal Rumble and test his luck there. Moving on here, we get a few backstage segments in a row, starting with Adam Pearce shown backstage talking on the phone, probably to a therapist if it was my guess, but he hangs up whenever Sonya Deville is shown standing next to him. And then Pearce says something along the lines of he heard that him and Sonya are going to be working together, and that kind of caught my attention and made me think that possibly Sonya's return may not be an in-ring return just yet. And that's what I initially thought, and more things kind of get confirmed. I mean, especially in this conversation that they had. And then even later, it definitely seems like Sonya is in a bit of an authority role. I mean, she definitely seems to be a WWE official, quote unquote, because she's going to be, it seems like, reporting to Adam Pearce or working alongside Adam Pearce. She even references booking matches. Like I know she mentioned something about the tag team contenders like Otis and Chad Gable after the tag team match that's coming up here pretty soon. So that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, I know that as soon as she was seen walking backstage last week and her return was all but announced, a lot of people kind of jumped the gun a little bit with, they probably scratched their Royal Rumble predictions and automatically filled in Sonya Deville, which I could understand that because she's definitely a good talent, but it seems like WWE has much different plans for her, and it seems like they are going to take a much slower approach with bringing her back. One thing I am curious to see is if she is only going to be this authority figure or official figure. I don't know exactly what to call her yet, but I wonder if she is going to be only on SmackDown or if she is going to be going with Adam Pearce on both shows, because they did mention that. She said that with Raw and SmackDown you have a lot going on. So I wonder if she is just going to be helping him with one show or if they are going to be doing this thing as a team on both shows. It is something to keep an eye on going forward. But another backstage segment here, we get Bianca and Bayley both declare for the Royal Rumble. One little note I have here is that Bianca did have that impressive coming out party last year at the Royal Rumble, so I expect something pretty similar, if not better, this year. And after that, we get Carmella shown backstage drinking champagne. And she acknowledges that Sasha's hustle to achieve her dream of getting to the WWE, and she commends her for being named Sports Illustrated #1 Superstar of 2020. But she also points out how it's simply a coincidence that award came in a year when she, as in Carmella, took a vacation. And then she adds that when it comes to talent, Sasha can't touch her. I just think this is inching closer and closer to a rematch for the SmackDown Women's Championship at the Royal Rumble. The closer we get to it without actually getting the match tells me that it would probably be just the smart idea to keep that match on the Royal Rumble card. But if they don't, then you can expect one, if not both. I mean, we've seen things crazier in the past. You can expect maybe both of these women to enter the Royal Rumble. Although I don't expect Sasha to, I do expect Carmella to, maybe even if she does have the championship match, just because how thin the women's division is. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought back a lot of legends and maybe even had a majority of the NXT roster be in the Royal Rumble, but there's really not that many women on the roster to fill up a 30-women Royal Rumble and have, legit surprises. There's probably going to be a bunch of women in there who aren't necessarily worthy of that spot, but I mean, that's all right. I'm not complaining about that at all. I'm just excited for a good Royal Rumble. I know that the first ever Women's Royal Rumble was one of my favorite Royal Rumbles just in general. I remember, actually, I think it was the one that Lita and Trish and all of them, they came back for, and Charlotte and Alexa Bliss were the current champions, and they watched outside of the ring in chairs, and you could just tell that they were just jealous, that they were just chomping at the bit, that they wanted to be in that match. So the Women's Royal Rumble always seems to over-deliver, so I'm definitely going to be paying attention. If you are wondering, yes, I am still on the Bianca Belair bandwagon. Been there since October. I am not going anywhere as we just get closer and closer to the Royal Rumble. I do feel like she still has a good chance to win it, so that will all be found out in the coming weeks. But we get a little bit more in-ring action here as the tag team championships are on the line with the Street Profits versus Ziggler and Robert Roode. Montez Ford was noticeably banged up from the beating he took last week, so Angelo Dawkins starts the match for the Street Profits. And one thing I noticed here, it does look like Robert Roode decided to match Dolph Ziggler's pink color scheme, so whoever it was that mentioned that on the mailbag episode this last week, Ziggler and Roode might have taken your advice, because it looks like they did decide to look more like a team, so there you go on that. Montez Ford does, however, make it into the match, and he still goes all out for his team despite his injury. His moveset isn't very limited, or at least he doesn't allow it to be, but because of that, his availability, gosh, guys, I'm so sorry. I'm trying my hardest to get these words out. His availability takes a hit, and he has to spend a majority of his match on the apron while Dawkins carried the load, but whenever he did get tagged in, he did not disappoint. He was getting the better of Rude and Ziggler on one leg. He even kicks out of a beautiful fisherman suplex by Robert Roode, but the double team does end up catching up to him, and after several blatant chops to his already injured leg, Dolph Ziggler hits a zigzag to get the win, and we do have new SmackDown Tag Team Champions. And even though they won, they didn't fail to put a stamp on their victory by attacking the Street Profits from behind one more time and then hold up their new championships. One thing I did write down here is that not only was this a great match for everyone involved, especially Montez Ford, despite picking up a loss and losing the Tag Team Championships, obviously, but he showed why his name is mentioned whenever you talk about future stars in the company. And this might be a pretty crazy comparison. I know I've made a couple of these already, but this might be my craziest one. But for some reason, it kind of stuck in my head while I was watching this match, and it wouldn't go away. And you guys obviously can tell me if you think I'm crazy for this, but does Montez Ford not remind you a little bit of Edge? And I know you're probably saying, what the hell are you talking about? But if you just kind of look at the way they're built, I mean, Edge was never like a very big guy. He's very tall, just like Montez Ford, and lanky, but he's not... like, they're not, like, thick. Like, they're kind of built the same. And whenever you just look at, like, whenever Montez Ford does, like, the thing where he grabs the ropes and he just goes crazy, I mean, that's kind of the equivalent to whenever Edge gets down in his spear position and, like, is moving his hair, just grinding his teeth, just has that crazy look. I mean, they definitely have some similarities, not just in the way they're built, but it's just one thing to keep an eye on if you aren't necessarily sold on Montez Ford yet, to know that, I mean, somebody who's kind of cut from the same cloth as him as far as stature and style has obviously had such a great career. And I know that that is very high praise comparing somebody to Edge. And maybe I don't want to go exactly that far yet, but it's just kind of something that I thought in my mind that, I don't know, he just reminds me of him a little bit. So that's just one thing. Maybe it's kind of hard to picture it maybe right now, but next time you watch Montez Ford in the ring, kind of just see if you can see it too. And obviously, if not, feel free to message me on Twitter and tell me that I am a lunatic. But after that match, we get Adam Pearce, again, backstage with Paul Heyman. And I actually wanted to provide some audio for this specific backstage segment, but unfortunately, they do not have the video yet on YouTube, so I didn't want to go through the trouble of trying to get my mic close enough to my TV to where you can hear us. So I was just like, oh, screw it, I'm not going to worry about that right now. But basically, and the main reason why I wanted to provide audio is because of how good Paul Heyman was on the mic right here. I didn't want to sell him short, or Adam Pearce, or any of the things they said, because obviously I don't just want to go word for word. If that was the case, you guys could just watch SmackDown with subtitles. So I wanted to make sure to just give you exactly how big this was. But long story short here, Adam Pearce was added to the gauntlet match that is going to take place later on tonight to determine the number one contender for the Universal Championship at the Royal Rumble. And that is what I was alluding to earlier with the backstage, or the segment where they said that Adam Pearce has a backstory, I guess you could say, with being an in-ring wrestler. And they keep on touching on that. And at this moment, that's why I wanted to provide audios, because I thought this was going to be, a pretty big moment on the show, because maybe Adam Pearce was actually going to, I didn't know what to expect. I'd never even thought about the possibility of him stepping in the ring, so I didn't know if it was going to be like one of those old school, like whenever Eric Bischoff would get in the ring, or Jonathan Coachman, when they would just, one move and you'd be out, which is pretty much what happened, but I wasn't sure what to expect, so I thought this was a little bit bigger of an event than what it turned out to be, but we will get to that once we get to the gauntlet match, and more so towards the end. But staying backstage here, we get the Riot Squad, and Billie Kay walks up, and she asks if they can turn the Riot Duo back into the Riot Squad, meaning 3 people. They say no, and then Billie Kay kind of starts to, freak out and start crying, saying that nobody wants to be her partner, this and that, and Liv begins to explain herself, but she's immediately interrupted. I guess Billie Kay took that as her saying, never mind, you can join our team, because she immediately starts saying things like she can be punked, that she just started listening to Blink 182, and that apparently on her resume it's listed that she's a mosh pitting expert. And for those of you that don't know, there's actually a pretty funny video on the internet of Billie Kay kind of throwing her hands up and somebody put some heavy metal behind it. So it's actually a pretty funny video, and that's probably what she was alluding to there. But one thing I did want to say here, and this might be a little bit of a hot take, especially if there's any like diehard R-Truth fans out there, but I personally think Billie Kay is the best comedy act that WWE has going on right now. And don't get me wrong, no disrespect to R-Truth. I know that's been his title, the thing he hangs his hat on for God knows how long. But I just feel like it's just different. Like with my style of comedy, I like to feel like they're not trying extremely hard to make me laugh. You know what I mean? Like when I feel like Billie Kay is out there doing her thing, she's kind of just being a little bit of herself, letting her personality show. And obviously she's trying to be funny a little bit, but it's not just like, blatantly obvious. Like with R-Truth, whenever he does that little Jimmy stuff, I mean, I'm sorry if you love that. I'm not trying to belittle what you like or anything like that, but that thing has never been over with me. I feel like it's literally an insult to my intelligence. Just like, are you kidding me right now, dude? I'm not in the 4th grade anymore. Like, you got to stop this. But there's just things like that R-Truth does that it's just like, dude, come on, man. Like, I know that the younger crowd probably just, eats into that and loves it. But, I mean, if you're asking me who I'd rather sit down and watch a 30-minute promo or anything like that, just a comedy segment. If you're asking me who I would rather watch a comedy segment from, I'm definitely choosing Billie Kay 10 times out of 10. But moving on here, we get in real time, this was a long, extremely long gauntlet match. Like I said, it was about, when you include commercials, about 45, 50 minutes of the show. So nearly half of it was taken up by this one match. But I mean, obviously there's like 5 matches inside this one match. So technically there was a lot of in-ring work here. But that's where we will go right now to the main event. And the first person that is introduced is actually Rey Mysterio. Sami Zayn is the other participant who starts this match, and he actually comes out with his own personal cameraman and photographer. Apparently he's making his own documentary. I'm guessing that's something that he says in a promo that he cuts. And in this promo, he acknowledges the corporate stooges and talks about the conspiracy that cost him his Intercontinental Championship. But he says that that's not going to stop him from going through everybody in the gauntlet because Sami Zayn is undeniable, according to him. And about 10 seconds later, the bell rang, and Rey Mysterio hit Sami Zayn with the roll-up and eliminated him. So, there you go. But hopefully this won't be a trend for Sami. I don't want to see him book like a complete joke, but, I mean, this documentary crew, whatever that is, it could add a little bit of a wrinkle to his character, so he continues to evolve in this quote-unquote conspiracy theory version of Sami Zayn. But, I mean, I definitely want to see him be competitive at the very least. But Shinsuke Nakamura comes out next to take on Rey Mysterio, and this is actually a pretty intense quick match that ends when Nakamura makes Mysterio tap out with an armbar. And then Corbin sprints out to the ring immediately and throws Dominic into the steps just for good measure. Dominic was out there watching Rey Mysterio compete, obviously. I probably forgot to mention that. But yes, Corbin throws him into the steps. And then Corbin hops in the ring and continues his beatdown by attacking Shinsuke Nakamura and Rey Mysterio. So this is one thing that kind of, I mean, you can never, really take too seriously what a heel does in a gauntlet match. I mean, you can't just look at every single person they attack and, think too much into it. Like, for instance, with Shinsuke Nakamura, this is one thing that I thought, wait a minute, why is Corbin attacking Shinsuke like that? But, I mean, obviously, that's who he was going to have to fight next anyway. So I guess I myself was looking way too much into that. But I kind of just was wondering, and I'll get a little bit into that a little bit later. But Baron Corbin does all he can do, but he doesn't quite have what it takes to outman Shinsuke. And Shinsuke caught him with a quick Kinshasa to eliminate him as the second straight competitor that Shinsuke eliminates. And then things get a little bit harder here whenever Daniel Bryan comes out next. And this is a moment I really would have loved to see a crowd reaction. They probably would have been going crazy for the entirety of this match because this was by far the best in-ring work of the night. And tonight had some pretty great matches, so, I mean, that does speak a lot. But Shinsuke and Daniel as a matchup, I mean, they have similar styles, so obviously they match up well together. And this was everything you would expect it to be, and honestly, a WrestleMania-worthy match. It was as back and forth as it gets. Daniel Bryan comes close to making Shinsuke tap out, actually with a yes lock, but he's unsuccessful and he's not able to pull it off. So So Shinsuke continues the trend of using his Kinshasa knee strike and then pins Daniel Bryan to pick up another win. These two guys show respect to each other after the match, which isn't usually what a heel would do. That's one thing I was trying to say a little bit earlier, but I couldn't quite spit it out. Shinsuke Nakamura shows respect to Daniel Bryan after the match, which isn't usually what a heel does. And then he got attacked by Baron Corbin, kind of like a babyface would. I mean, the Mysterios are babyfaces, and they also got attacked by Corbin, and Shinsuke got attacked right there along with them. So it's just one thing to kind of make you, think about. I mean, the seeds are there, but I'm not sure I would buy into a Shinsuke babyface turn just yet. But their moment of sportsmanship is cut short by Roman Reigns' music, who comes out with Paul Heyman and Jey Uso to watch Adam Pearce go one-on-one with Shinsuke Nakamura. But before Pearce enters the ring, Roman and Jey take it upon themselves to climb into the ring and jump Shinsuke Nakamura, basically to make it a little bit easier for Adam Pearce. But they throw Adam Pearce into the ring, and then Jey Uso hits him with a super kick, knocks him out. This is exactly what a super kick should do. I don't see how we can see 5 of these a match, and it doesn't even do anything, but as soon as Adam Pearce gets hit with one, he's just out cold. Nothing ever happened. It's just crazy to me. But anyway, Roman calls for the bell to be rung after that and the match to begin. And this match ends pretty quickly because all it consisted of was Roman and Jey dragging Adam Pearce on top of Shinsuke and telling the referee to make the count, giving Adam Pearce the win and an opportunity for the Universal Championship at the Royal Rumble against, Roman Reigns. So, yikes. I do not know what they're doing here. I mean, this is just crazy. I don't know who Adam Pearce pissed off backstage, what he did, but I mean, I am very intrigued to see if this is actually going to go down, if they're actually going to have Roman Reigns go one-on-one with Adam Pearce at the Royal Rumble. And if so, I mean, I'm kind of curious to see what Adam Pearce got. I mean, he's not a small guy by any means. If he has a wrestling background, he obviously must know a little bit. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not saying by any means he's going to even compete or come close to even lasting with Roman Reigns. Obviously, Roman Reigns is one of the hugest wrestlers in the wrestling industry right now, period. So I'm not expecting some WWE official to even hold a candle to him, but it's just one thing, to keep an eye on. I mean, it's not necessarily going to be the worst thing in the world to see Adam Pearce get his head kicked off by Roman Reigns. So I mean, it's pretty much a win-win. So I mean, if you tune in, you're probably going to enjoy it. But that is the SmackDown review right there, guys. There really wasn't too much outside of the actual wrestling that caught my eye. Like I said, I mean, Carmella had a backstage segment, a little bit of Sonya Deville getting introduced to her possible new role. But other than that, I mean, it was mainly inside the ring tonight. So that's always good for me. I love whenever that's the case. It's a lot easier to watch SmackDown whenever you're just watching the match and not having to, pay attention to what exactly everybody's saying. Does it mean this? Does it mean that? I mean, not that I don't enjoy it, but I mean, I definitely love whenever there's more wrestling on a wrestling show. So that's something that I can appreciate. But like I promised, guys, we're going to get right to the top 5 general managers right now. All right, guys, it is top 5 time, and this time we are going to do my top 5 general managers / authority figures of all time. And this is going to be a short list. I mean, there's not really a whole lot you could say about general managers. We're going to get into detail about a few of them, but number 5 here is Paul Heyman, whenever he had a short run as a general manager of SmackDown. I think it might have actually been Thursday Night SmackDown at the time, if I'm not mistaken. But Paul Heyman was pretty good as a SmackDown general manager as far as being that heel general manager across from the heel general manager that was on Raw. I feel like that moment in wrestling history was just done so well. I mean, a lot of people hate the general manager idea today, and I understand it. And obviously Adam Pearce, who we saw a lot of on tonight's episode, is pretty much the closest thing we've gotten to that in a little bit. I mean, I don't really count the Kurt Angle, Daniel Bryan, Mick Foley, that general manager era. I don't really count that. I count someone who isn't a wrestler, but of course now Adam Pearce is starting to find himself inside the ring, but somebody who's not a former legend, I guess you can say. Somebody who is known more so for being a general manager. And Paul Heyman it's no secret that he can run a company. He can book. He's great. I mean, he's responsible for ECW and many, many other things. He's one of the most well-respected businessmen and promos and managers in all of wrestling history. So, I mean, I just feel like he deserves a spot on this list just strictly because I remember him very vividly having a big role in those early SmackDown days. The 2002, 2003, right at that beginning of the Ruthless Aggression era, I feel like that's whenever Paul Heyman was really in the thick of things of being the general manager on SmackDown. And I know for sure he was a part of one of the drafts because if I'm not mistaken, he actually got drafted to Raw, and that was the end of his tenure as a SmackDown general manager. So they kind of wrote him off the screen like that because he quit immediately on the stage whenever he was drafted. So at number 5, I feel like it's worthy to put Paul Heyman there just strictly because, I mean, he's still relevant to the company today. He has a big role. So he's clearly, and especially still on SmackDown. I mean, that was the place he was the general manager at way back then. So just on my list, I feel like he deserves a spot here. So number 5, not too high. He just gets on there, just barely makes it. And we'll move on here to number 4, and that is actually Vicky Guerrero. And just by name recognition alone, you should know about Vicky Guerrero. Obviously, she is the wife of the WWE's most beloved wrestler of all time, and that's Eddie Guerrero. And she was actually the general manager whenever I wasn't really watching wrestling every week. I wasn't too into it at the time, so I didn't get to see her live, but I've done plenty of research, and believe it or not, I actually have a lot of memories for some reason of her. I mean, probably just from clips on the internet, but just of her screaming and being obnoxious. And I'm pretty sure she might have been with Edge at one point, if I'm not mistaken, just from peeking in. Like I said, I really wasn't watching too much at the time, so anything that I'm suggesting might have happened during her tenure as a general manager as far as specific events was all just probably me peeking in here and there and seeing something and wondering what the heck's going on. But she was general manager for both shows. 32 months on SmackDown, including a 19-month reign and 11 months on Raw. So, I mean, she was there for quite some time, and if you're not doing somewhat of a good job, they're not going to keep you around for that long. So, clearly, she was doing something right. So, I feel like she deserves, and I mean, her being relevant in the wrestling world today as well, she deserves a spot on this list too. So, number 4 for Vicky Guerrero. And at number 3 here, and some people can argue that he deserves to be at number 1, and that is the only general manager on this list who is still active and currently a general manager today, and that is the NXT general manager, William Regal. Now, I mean, he's been general manager at NXT for 6.5 years and counting, like straight, since 2014. So, I mean, there's been quite a few transitions as far as the NXT roster since he's been there. So he's seen them all come through. I mean, all of the classes, I guess you could say, that come up from NXT to the main roster, like that started with Charlotte, Sasha, Becky, and all of them, Finn Balor, Seth Rollins, even before that, Kevin Owens. I mean, all of them, you name it, they probably went through William Regal's NXT. You know, I just personally feel like he fits NXT like a glove, really. I mean, I watch NXT occasionally. Sometimes there'll be times where I watch it, you know, for weeks at a time and actually get into certain storylines that are going on, but admittedly, I do not watch it as much as I probably should. So I'm not too familiar with exactly what's going on, but I do know that William Regal is somebody who is a well-respected general manager. He did have a little bit of time as a general manager of Raw, if I'm not mistaken, late in 2007, maybe early 2008. He was the general manager of Raw, and he wasn't quite as fair as he is now, so he was definitely more of a heel figure back then, but just with how he is right now on the NXT, especially with how he announces the War Games and all that, he definitely has a prominent role. They have that raised thing, whatever it is that he stands on. It's like a podium where he's way up high. They sometimes do spots where they throw somebody off of it. I just think that's a nice little addition. And they still have it's not a NXT official, quote unquote. He's called the general manager. So I like that they're staying true to that. And I wish that WWE would take a page from NXT's book and maybe bring someone like that back who is respected and can hold down that general manager spot for years, just like William Regal has. So at number 3, we got William Regal. And up next at number 2 is obviously one of my personal favorites, and that is Teddy Long, somebody who was actually just on Monday Night Raw, the Legends Night, who we're not going to get really too into that. everybody's already commented on that. They're not really too fond of this last episode of Monday Night Raw, so I will not mention that right now. But as far as Teddy Long goes, I mean, he has 2 separate long-term reigns as general manager. He had a 38-month reign and then a 36-month reign, so that's quite a long time, especially to do that twice. And there's just a lot of memories. I mean, the first memory I have of Teddy Long, and this is something that I seen way back, is he actually used to be a referee. I'm not sure if he was a referee for very long, but he 100% was a referee, and I'm not sure exactly what happens, what you have to say backstage to Vince McMahon or whatever to catch his eye to make you say, oh, we need to get that referee out of the striped suit and put a suit on him and get him on the camera. Because, I mean, something had to have happened, because Teddy Long, you just never see that, you know? I mean, you never see an official go from just doing that every week to being a guy running a show on SmackDown, which is what it was, because he was a referee on Raw, and then he went to running the show on SmackDown, which is just crazy. It might be the biggest pay raise. I mean, I don't want to necessarily talk about it or associate it with that, or I guess you could say promotion. Just within one day he woke up and he was a referee, and the next day he woke up and he was, well, actually, never mind. He didn't go straight from being the referee to the general manager. He did go to managing, obviously, the likes of Mark Henry, Jazz. There were several people. Because he had a really good, just during the Raw days, I remember specifically whenever Randy Orton was the Intercontinental Champion and Mark Henry was going at that, or at least trying to go after that belt, Teddy Long was basically doing his version of what MVP's doing right now. You know, he's the mouthpiece. That's pretty much what Teddy Long was for Mark Henry back in the day. He needed him because Mark Henry wasn't necessarily known for cutting A-plus promos, but having Teddy Long by his side obviously made Mark Henry that much bigger of a star. So they do see that he does add value. That is Teddy Long. So as a general manager, I remember seeing him in person here in Texas whenever he came to a show. I'm not sure exactly why he showed up. It might have just been to give the crowd one of the let me holla at you players, one of those. So I know that he was definitely a fan favorite. As you just saw, he was, like I just said, he was on Monday Night Raw. The fans still love him. He definitely could still get a pop. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame just a couple years ago, so he's definitely a pretty big name in the industry, and he's definitely worthy of being on this list and much, much more, and all the accomplishments he has gotten. So Teddy Long at number 2. And at number 1, this should actually come as no surprise to most of you if you've watched every episode, or at least the episodes where I've mentioned my history of being a wrestling fan and where it all started. And it started for me back in the late 90s with WCW, and then it picked back up really, really extreme during the Ruthless Aggression era on Raw. And what is the common denominator between both those eras? Eric Bischoff. So obviously Eric Bischoff is the number 1 on this list, and he had 41 consecutive months as general manager. And in my personal opinion, he is the best general manager of all time. Obviously, coming in at number 1 says that, but just whenever you look at what he did, he's by far he was involved every week. I remember specifically, and I've told you guys this before, but I used to not be able to watch the pay-per-views live whenever I was a kid growing up. My parents just didn't want to get them for whatever reason. Probably just didn't want to fork up the money, which, that's cool. I totally understand that. But nonetheless, didn't get to watch the pay-per-views growing up. But I did remember specifically that my dad did buy one. It was, I can't remember exactly which one it was. But it was the one whenever Stone Cold Steve Austin went one-on-one with Eric Bischoff, and he had his karate suit, and he did the moves through the watermelon and all those other fruits, something like that. But that specifically, my dad bought that pay-per-view just to see Eric Bischoff get his ass kicked. So anytime somebody mentions heel heat and they talk about, oh, you want to see this person, that person get his ass kicked, that's what I'm reminded of, and it tells me that heel heat definitely does exist, and it is a difference, because back then whenever pay-per-views were a lot more expensive than just logging into the WWE Network for $10 a month, you went out of your way to buy a pay-per-view just to see him get his ass kicked. So that was one thing that I remember. And then just every week, this was the era when I was watching Raw, and it was just the absolute best. And I hated Eric Bischoff. I hated his guts every week. He had his theme song that anytime he came out, you just knew, oh my gosh, this guy. And then he had Jonathan Coachman as kind of just like his lackey. And I think even for a little bit he had John Morrison So, I mean, he's had multiple different versions of himself. I mean, his long, silky black hair to his gray hair version. I mean, it just being the one guy, and I know that it wasn't for 82 weeks in the grand scheme of things, or 83 weeks, whichever one it was, isn't a very long time in the big picture. But just to go head-to-head with Vince McMahon and know that, hey, he's the only person to do that successfully for at least an extended period of time. I mean, he's probably going to hang that on his head, or hang his hat on that for the rest of his life. He might even put it on his tombstone. I mean, because that is just, in the industry he chose, he definitely, probably you could say, got the, I mean, I don't know what you want to look at if you want to think of WCW itself as a company getting the silver medal, or, I mean, AEW is making a nice little run here. That's not what we're talking about here. It's going to be decided way later anyways. But if we're talking about Eric Bischoff, he's just one person that if you didn't get to watch Raw, or if you didn't watch wrestling back in that era, I would highly recommend going to watch even just a few episodes from like 2003, 2004, just to see exactly what a heel general manager is and what they can add to the product and how good they can be and how much better they can make the show. So I wouldn't mind seeing WWE get back to that. It looks like they're trying a little bit with Adam Pearce. It'd be nice if there was one per show. Because if you guys haven't noticed, which you probably have, I love the brand split. I want them to do it and be as strict as they possibly can. I don't care for how long. I don't care if I never see Roman Reigns on Raw again. That's just, I mean, how I feel about it with the brand split. If they have to leave it how it is now, which I know they're not going to, I'm just trying to put it in perspective how I feel about it. So if they could just do what they can to keep this thing how it's going, because I don't want to, I don't want to jinx anything, because, I mean, as of lately, they've been doing pretty good at it. I have nothing to complain about. The only people who really cross over are the SmackDown Women's Champion, which makes total sense. They've even explained it. I mean, they obviously are allowed to do that. So I'm not really going to complain much about the brand split, and I don't really want to get too much more off topic here, like I already have. But anyways, to cap off this top 5 list, I want to make sure that I made myself very clear that Eric Bischoff is number 1. Well, guys, that was the episode, the SmackDown review and top 5 general managers. I hope that you guys enjoyed it. I do apologize for it being so late. I know that sometimes whenever I do these podcasts this late, I sometimes struggle to get through them, so I know that probably isn't the best listening experience for y'all, so I do apologize for that, and I appreciate you guys listening. I'm going to continue to try to do these as early as possible just to get them to you at the usual time, but still be able to do a pretty good job on it. So, like I said, I do appreciate you guys listening. I appreciate you guys tuning in. I hope you guys will tune into the weekend review here coming up this Sunday. I'll be joining Matt to talk about everything in wrestling this week. I'm excited to give my thoughts on this great episode of Monday Night Raw that we just had happen, as well as hear Matt's thoughts on SmackDown and just get to chop it up with him a little bit. Haven't really got to talk wrestling with him at all, so it's going to be nice to get to finally hop on the flagship show and give you guys a little bit more content. But once again, guys, thank you so much for listening. I apologize for it being such a late episode for me to record. It's not any later than what I've done in the past, but sometimes I'm a little less tired than I am right now. So I am definitely dragging getting to this finish line. But once again, guys, thank you so much. I hope you guys tune in next week. Tune into the weekend review here coming up on Sunday. But until then, guys, I will talk to you next week.